welcome to this new episode of the podcast. And today we have Razann Al Ghussein, who is a senior consultant in climate change and sustainability. She is also the curator of the Dubai Hub of Global Shapers. She has a master's degree in MSc Environment and Development. Welcome to this episode of the podcast, Razann.
Thank you so much, Achuth. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. How is the UAE experiencing the impact of climate change? What are some of the notable climate-related challenges specific to the region?
Yeah, so I think if we think about the UAE and the Middle East in general, a large impact of climate change that we're seeing is the rising temperatures. So very much, our summers are becoming unbearable. When I was younger, I used to always try to escape the summer during my school break, but of course that becomes increasingly difficult. But what we're really seeing is that the rise in temperature is quite significant, particularly in the Middle East. We're seeing that the temperature rise is maybe rising at a speed of double in the Middle East. And with that, of course, comes a double in terms of double the global average. And with that, of course, you have significant impacts on the habitability of the Middle East, impacts on food security, for example. Within the Middle East, you're also seeing extreme weather events. We saw the devastating floods in Libya recently. We're seeing floods in the UAE, for example, in a city called Fujairah. And of course, these are all having an impact on the habitability of these areas. I think a key issue in the coming years and something that the UAE is really focusing on is food security. So the country's really looking at how do we improve our food security as a country who doesn't have much arable land, who's very water scarce, and a country that's very much dependent on importing food into the country. And I think we're also seeing that in other places in the Middle East. So in southern Iraq, for example, we saw agricultural decline because of increasing temperatures. And this has significant add-on effects, such as, a lot of the people who were working in agriculture would then have to move to cities. And that has other stresses on climate in terms of additional stress on water scarcity, on water supply and scarcity. So unfortunately, as with climate change in most places, we're seeing that there is not one singular impact, and it's very difficult to then see, how to prevent and mitigate against the impacts.
Yeah, I still vividly remember, I think, the fact that COVID had happened probably 2 years back. I think that was the defining moment where the UAE or the Middle East, recognized the fact that, hey, we have to kind of be food secure because a lot of the supply was coming out from India and, South Asia, and the supply chains got disrupted at that point of time.
Of course, yeah. So I think that what the UAE is really trying to do is look at, what are the technologies that they can adopt and what are the partnerships that they can adopt, say with other governments and with businesses to really drive, having that stable food secure system. So, I mean, there is quite interesting technology. There's say like fog capturing and fog harvesting to try and get water. So there is really interesting technology. I think that the aspect that's perhaps limiting is the feasibility of, expanding that on a large scale. But I'm excited and definitely optimistic to see solutions that we can have in the future.
That's exciting. I mean, I think this is something that everyone's working on at this particular point. Vertical farms are coming up. How do you actually revolutionize producing food that can actually work at a scale?
Yeah, for sure.
I haven't got a consultant in this particular podcast, so I got a lot of questions too. So I might be rushing through some of them. So how does the consulting career intersect with climate and sustainability initiatives? Could you share examples of how your consulting work has contributed to addressing climate issues? Because when you talk about consulting, people usually think about strategy consulting or business consulting towards the more business side of things. But I think people fail to recognize that the ESG governance or the new sustainability consulting is actually something that's picking up pace in terms of revenue that's being generated for the firms, including the big fours. So please shed your thoughts on the same.
Yeah, for sure. I think one, it's been really interesting to see the growth of sustainability consulting, and you really can do such a variety of work. So my work is predominantly working with both the public and private sector organizations across a range of issues. So whether that be, developing an ESG strategy for a company looking to, look at how do they manage waste better, how do they manage their water supply, also looking and considering ESG. It's also looking at, how do we improve our diversity as well, and integrate, other perspectives into the work that we're doing. So, as you said, it's very broad. Another what I'm seeing a large increase on now is companies looking at how do they decarbonize their operations. We're seeing countries setting net zero targets, the UAE being net zero by 2050, and so companies are now thinking, okay, what do we need to do in order to support our nation to get to those targets? So working on, say, setting science-based targets to really help them become net zero by a certain date.
That's actually very, very exciting. So I just had a particular questions for you. So in your opinion, what is the driving force behind this? The companies adopting all these sustainability practices. Would you say that it's the cost factor? They are looking at the broad spectrum and they're saying, hey, if you want to have a long-term strategy, this is how we have to be. Or would you say it is because of the policy aspects, because of the regulatory aspects, or even because of the consumers who are too conscious about these things at this point of time?
I think there are definitely several factors. I think, as you mentioned, it's all about looking at what are the opportunities and risks of transitioning to net zero. So a lot of the risks will come from what if we fail to, adapt our operations in line with, say, an incoming policy. So it's trying to get ahead of, policy that's coming in. We're also seeing that customers and consumers are demanding more transparency around the products that they buy. So companies are trying to use that as a competitive advantage. So let's say we're a first mover in the region who are, considering what, our missions are in our supply chain. I think cost is a difficult one to win clients over at the moment. It's still very, cost intensive. But it's all about looking, long term, what are the costs now compared to what they would be in the future? Of course, much larger when the impact on climate change will be much greater, for example, on your operations.
True, true. I think that this is an exciting time to be in the sustainability consulting space.
For sure.
Coming to the Dubai Hub of Global Shapers community, congratulations on getting selected for the El Khoi event that will be happening at Dubai. So could you please tell the audience, what El Khoi is and what they can expect to
Yeah,
happen at
so
the event?
we're delighted to be co-organizing the local conference of youth. So just as a background, so Youngo, who are the youth and climate constituency of the UNFCCC, typically will ask youth organizations to host a local conference of youth within their locality, which really looks to capacity build in terms of upskilling youth for those attending, say, climate negotiations, as well as really learning what youth want to see at COP28 or at COPs in the future. So there's typically a local conference of youth, and the outcomes of that will be fed into a regional conference of youth, and then to the main conference of youth, which is typically held in the city that COP is hosted. And the outcome of each of these conferences will be a youth statement on what youth across the world want to see as an outcome of COP and what their demands are across the different topics, say food security, climate financing, and it's really to push the need for intergenerational climate justice. So we're delighted to be hosting it in a few weeks now, so at the end of October, and we really hope to shape, a great a youth statement that really showcases what youth in the UAE want to see out of COP.
So, what can an average person who's going to attend this event, particularly near Dubai, can expect out of the event? What are the exciting things that awaits them?
Yeah, so we're very lucky to be working with local UN, the local UN organizations, and they're really looking at, facilitating youth with the skill set on how do you negotiate, how to make a clear pathway and opportunities for you to engage with both your government and business leaders. Also, what youth can be doing. So sometimes, you feel like you want to action, you want to get involved in climate action, but what is the best way to do that? So really looking at providing opportunities for youth to do so, as well as I think engaging with youth in your city, working on climate issues, I think is really important. Ultimately, I think building consensus, building relationships with others is really key to then having a collective drive towards climate action.
That's actually very interesting. Shout out to the event that is going to happen in Dubai.
And I
Can you
just actually,
also, yep, go on.
so just also to shout out, there are other hubs, Global Shapers hubs, hosting local conferences of youth. So it's great to see other Global Shapers community doing the same thing.
Definitely, definitely. I think it's pretty exciting. Even we had actually applied for it, but we did not get through this year, but definitely we're gonna apply next year as well.
Yeah, for sure. Fingers crossed.
So can you tell us more about the other activities that the Dubai Hub is doing with sustainability and climate in mind?
Yeah, so I think, of course, with COP28 in the UAE and more specifically in Dubai this year, a lot of our projects have been focused on climate action. Previous projects that we're continuing is educating students. So we've gone into universities and schools to talk about climate action, whether that be particularly on food security or food waste, and really what students can do. I think through my education and, doing my undergrad in geography, a lot of it was I was learning about the problems of climate change and what that would bring, but hardly the solutions. So I think what we really wanted to do within the Shapers community and within our hub is provide those tangible solutions for youth. Of course, it's not solely as an individual response that's needed, but just an avenue for youth to be able to do something. So that's predominantly what we're doing. Of course, around COP, we're trying to, with a broader COP28 Global Shapers Task Force, what we're doing is trying to engage shapers around the world who will be at COP in order to amplify their voices through different sessions at COP. And we'll also be sharing a survey with all shapers across the world to really get their feedback on what they want to see at COP, as well as how the Global Shapers community can support youth in terms of bettering their climate initiatives.
Wow, that's really amazing.
Yeah, definitely lots to look forward to.
Yeah. Another aspect that I just wanted to touch upon is the fact that Middle East has traditionally been uh, focused on energy. We have a lot of oil industry, oil and gas has been the major source of income for countries located in the Middle East. But right now, we see a very much tangible shift in terms of investments. You see a lot of green investments. You see diversification in terms of all the funds that are there in that particular geography. Uh, how do you what do you feel about it? The whole spectrum. Do you think that, hey, it is out of the realization that they have to move, they have to spread the risk into a lot of different sectors? And also, I just wanted your take because you've studied in Europe. So, how do you think, how equitable is the whole sustainability platform plus? Because you have a lot of funding that is involved, particularly for sustainable projects, sustainable activities, and a lot of the funding is supposedly to be happening from international institutions like probably IMF and World Bank. So when it comes to the global south, versus Europe in terms of the funding and in terms of whether there is an equitable distribution of the resources for tackling the challenge of climate change, how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't work a lot in climate finance, but I do think, say an outcome of COP26 was the Loss and Damage Fund, which I think is key. As you said, we see that a lot of the inevitable impacts of climate change are in the global south, but of course they're not the major contributors. And there's definitely, some shocking statistics. I won't quote any just in case I get them wrong, but around, the top 5% of highest, most wealthiest individuals contributing, quite a significant amount to the impacts of climate change. But I do think, I'm hopeful to see, say, the outcome of COP28 being how can that loss and damage fund be implemented? I think it's great to see that it's been something that's been agreed upon, but we really want to see what is the actual outcome of that. And I think, yeah, it's definitely needed. Yeah.
Certainly. And as a final question, since you are a sustainability professional, what advice would you offer to professionals or students aspiring to contribute to climate solutions for a consulting career? Because at this point, we have a lot of options in consulting, especially in the sustainability space. People are confused when all the jargons come up. Because we are consultant, we
Yeah.
like to use jargons.
Yeah, of course. You have to get used to all the different ones. And I think that's probably the most difficult thing about, this sustainability consulting. And I think the climate space is that it's changing so quickly. So you have different reporting standards coming out nearly every year, or they're trying to consolidate a few. So keeping up to date is quite difficult. But I think perhaps advice that I would give is, or the beauty of consulting that I see, is that you can go in and see, okay, I'm going to work across different sectors and across different projects. And I think my advice would be try all these different types of projects to then see what you're most interested in, and then, identify how to, stick to that certain path. So, for example, whether you want to stay in sustainable finance or you want to go more into the energy sector and decarbonization. So I think there's lots of different opportunities within just sustainability consulting alone. And then another piece of advice I think is sometimes step back from what you're doing. It's also advice to myself, but I think consulting, we're very much, developing a PowerPoint presentation. It can get repetitive and you sometimes lose sight of the broader picture and what you're doing. So I think taking a step back and saying, okay, this is why this presentation is so crucial. I'm helping an organization identify their science-based net zero targets. And I think sometimes when you're in the day-to-day of just preparing a presentation, that can sometimes get lost.
Totally, totally. And I think even if you look at the firms, if you look at the product offerings that the firms are pitching, it's not yet still at the mature phase. So they are still
Yeah.
developing on the product offerings and various other offerings that we can actually give to our clients. So I think it's still a work in progress when you look at the whole market, and there's still a lot of opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think even in my 3 years of sustainability consulting, you can see how the product offering changed from the beginning to now. So yeah, always evolving.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Razan, for spending your time with us and your amazing insights and thoughts
Thank you for
on
having me.
climate, on sustainability. And we wish you all the very best for your ELCOI and for all the future endeavors of the Dubai Global Shapers.
Thank you so much, Achuth. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.